Hello everyone, this is Greyshot17, and today I'm covering your comments that you posted in, well, the Company of Heroes 2, Company of Heroes 3, overview video I did called The Good, the Bad, and the CoH3 Alpha, as well as my Discord, where I asked my community to submit what they thought of the CoH3 Alpha, and I'd kind of go over their comments since I wanted to hear what you all had to say and kind of reference it with my own and see maybe if my opinions changed or things have been altered, or maybe you guys have a different perspective. I tried to get a nice wide variety of comments from people who liked my opinion, didn't like my opinion, and called me all sorts of stuff. But without further ado, let's get into this, shall we? I'm going to have some music in the background so to enjoy. Again, this is more of a relaxing sort of going over your comments. So I'm going to be a little less formal with this and kind of just give my general opinion. I won't spend too much time on each of these, but I do want to get into it. But before I do, as a quick reminder, if you want to join my Discord down below, that's where a lot of my community members are to join like stuff like Fan Friday. And I have a $1,000 tournament coming on up for 4v4 games in Company of Heroes 2. So if you're interested in that, again, Discord down below. But let's get into this. This was submitted by GTA. He submitted into multiple parts. Dislike. Issues with building barbed wire and sandbags where they get canceled, interrupted. I agree. Again, having a order that you deploy or to do something get stopped, that's going to be a real annoying thing that happens. I have that right now in Starship Troopers Terran Command, where sometimes the unit doesn't want to respond immediately. I overall like that game, but it can be frustrating. The return to the Koan mine link system, I hate this. Please do not do the Koan mine link system. Because again, destroy one mine in a row, it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. Because the rest go. The pop cap for the dock unit seemed a little high. Again, I'm not going to say it's high or lower. Because again, he's referencing the Panzer III. I'm not going to say it's too high or too low because we don't know the faction yet. We have no idea what's in the dock faction. So until they give a detailed breakdown of everything that's in it and how it's organized and upgraded and stuff like that for multiplayer, I'm not going to judge that yet. Infantry not sticking the cover as well as Code 2. I noticed that a little bit, but again, I feel like they're just not sticky. I feel like that's something they'll probably refine before release. But here's hoping. You're right. It does get patched, so it's not as crazy to have infantry just running around. Numerous animation issues with the Flak 88. That's been addressed from, actually, there was a live stream today, the day I'm recording this, that they talked about that, and they were updating it already, apparently fixed that. We'll see if they actually do that, but that's what Relic said during a live stream today. Bugs with vehicle riding and not being able to ride if the tank is damaged, and the infantry have the ability to repair it. The repair command and embark command are the same button, making it possible to embark without repairing it. I can see that being an issue, definitely, and again, I think separating those keys, or maybe having the keys optional for control binding, I think that would solve that problem very quickly. But yeah, that way you don't have the same button, and that way they can jump on, even if it's slightly repaired. That way you could go over like stuff like, again, in Code 2, I think of S minefields, right? Where they're anti-infantry, but not armor. So you could jump your infantry onto the Panzer IV to ride over the mine, but your troops would be fine. Be curious about that. Dislike the dedicated truck that the Flak 88 has. I disagree. I think that truck is great. Just have to let us have the normal Blitz truck that's in the tech tree. I disagree again. I think that truck is fine. Having a unit have its own specialized thing, I'm totally fine with. So that way, again, it can be specifically integrated for that one unit. And you don't have a situation where if you patch that unit, it then affects all the other ones. It's separate. Audio bugs, again, there were some. And airstrikes and artillery taking too long. I agree, but I also think the animation takes too long. I think the animation needs to be faster and more smooth in terms of the strike itself, because it seems a little choppy. Likes, good sound design. Tanks and 88 sound punchy. I agree. Improved fire effects and new tank kill animations. I also really like that. Improved smoke effect and practical effects, particularly the airburst shells. Disagree with the airburst shells. I think they could look a little better. They look a little muddy, but I do like overall that they have that in there as well. Good unit variety and design. Good base design as well. I'm assuming talking about the dock, and yeah, I think it's okay. Good map design so far. Nothing that made it stand out, but I do agree. I like that there were multiple locations in this, from a barren desert to small settlements to an actual city. So I did like it for that aspect, because it seemed like a big map with multiple things going on. Vehicle side armor. I think everyone universally really likes the side armor. Vehicle riding. Fingers crossed for the Soviets later on as well, I guess. That would be cool to have a bunch of Soviet forces on there and even like jumping off to throw satchels. I think that would be, as someone who is amazing with the scout car satchel combo, I think that would be great. Visuals are much improved, particularly with infantry models and destruction. I agree. I like the destruction aspect. Reminds me of Bad Company 2. Having a more linear classic CoH style and a German one to boot. Yeah, a lot of people were really excited about the German campaign for this from what I saw when I was talking with others. I'm glad he mentioned that because except for the Tiger Ace campaign, and then you have the Theater of War missions that you did where some of them were more German focused during the battles of, I think they were to the Battle of Moscow through like the Spring Offensive in 43, like that campaign. People enjoy some of those missions, though. Again, they're kind of like off in its own Theater of War section. But it is nice to have a solid campaign. If it's going to be good or not, a different story. But it is nice they're making it. Improved UI clarity, I will say, but I also say again, we'll get to a few comments, but it could be a bit much. In-game unit stats, again, there's some people like my editor slash moderator Union, aka Rifle, that he's like, oh, be out of the job. It's like, no. Honestly, the more stuff they add to help players out with statistics, I think is better. So that way the people have a better idea about stats and how units operate. I think that's better. And it doesn't throw them out of the job because, again, it is so difficult in CoH2 to get stat info that it's so nice to have more clarity. And I think more clarity is always better for the player and the player base in general. Concerns: the length of the campaign, if it's concise like CoH1 or bogged down by unlockable characters in CoH2. As someone who just played CoH1, I have an unpopular opinion. I don't think CoH1 has likable characters in this, or not likable. Good characters. There we go. They are fine, and they're not like. I didn't find them, let's say, annoying like the main character in CoH2. I will agree with you there, but they're not. For me, no, there's no character in CoH1 I'm like, yes, he's memorable. It's like they're just your kind of standard soldier. That really doesn't, it's not like they have a story arc or anything. It's a very straightforward soldier story that's taking a lot of inspirations from Saving Private Ryan. I know I'm giving a review of CoH1, but as someone who just played it, and again, this is why I hate the mine system. I'm like, why the hell is it in CoH3? And I'm like, oh, it's from CoH1. I understand now. I hate that. I truly do. But yeah, here's hoping the campaign's good, but we'll see. The vehicle resurrection mechanic and how it can be potentially abused in multiplayer. Again, we saw the allies having this, so both sides already have it, and it costs resources. So it's still an investment, and it could be something that you let the enemy repair and then immediately kill, because it's a lot of resources that will be drained. The continually unclear support options, are they going to function like CoH2's commander or CoH1? I will agree, we haven't seen like here's all of your battle groups and here's how they can be implemented. So more information I think is needed before I can give judgment. CoH2 had a lot of different and cool commanders for the Soviets. My problem was, you knew typically based on what they picked going in, what they were most likely going to go. Added like I don't know how many. There's like over 20 commanders per faction. So the player's like, all right, I can expect this from this enemy. And the other problem was you only had 2 factions, and you can only play as one faction per multiplayer game on your team at the start. So it's either going to be the Soviets or the Wehrmacht. That was the beginning of CoH2, and a lot of people didn't like that. That's why people were relieved when the OKW and the Americans came in, and eventually the Brits. So that allowed for more creativity in terms of like how factions would interplay with each other, rather than the standard Soviet, standard Wehrmacht. So the fact there's 4 factions, I think will help alleviate and allow for more replayability. But again, it's going to be, I think you're right, it's going to be how they implement the commanders that will also add another layer to it. Unclear dock tech progress needs elaborating. Again, I agree. I want to see how that's going to be. And this is all from Longrod von Hugendog, aka GTA. To be fair, most of dislikes are bugs or balance issues. That's fair. I think that's a fair assessment to have. Again, if you have issues, ask questions initially. Don't not ask those questions and then have those issues pop up later. I think that's smart. And again, I think that's a good thing to have. All right, now we're getting to more of the rest of the community. Sorry, GTA just posted a very long comment, so I want to get through that as quickly as possible. Pong, very simple. I just want the Italian faction. We'll get to more details there, but I get this the issue at hand of, well, if we're in Italy, we're in North Africa, why aren't the Italians having their faction? But I get it from a design standpoint in terms of we need a fully defensive faction in 43. Well, the Italians are pretty much, during the time of that campaign, surrendering. So most of the units are being disarmed by the Germans. And, I mean, the Italians fought the Germans temporarily. And then, of course, you have some Italian units that fought with the Germans, but it was mostly German. And then on the flip side, it's some Italian units fighting with the Allies, but it's mostly Allied forces. So the Italians, weirdly enough, do not play, like, as an army-wise, the biggest factor in the Italian campaign. So then you go North Africa, and the main thrust of armor, infantry, and tactics is German command in 42, not Italian. Italians have input, but I mean, maybe it's because their code's cracked a lot more and stuff like that, but and also the fact they really don't have the industry to support major armored thrusts and supply them, which, again, why they didn't really advance in 40. I get it. I get why it's tough to make an Italian faction and a campaign around it. So that's, and since people throughout Code 2 were like, hey, we want the Africa Corps in, yeah, I did the Brits, why not add the Africa Corps? I get why they went with the Africa Corps, because in Code 2, that's what a lot of the player base wanted. Anyway, I think the screen felt way too full of stuff from Father Milam. Kind of felt all over the place. I really do love the armor value it gives you when you select a vehicle. Okay, that's nice. Again, more information to the player. Great. And again, customizing the UI, I feel like, is a good way to address that issue. Union Wen says, voice acting has been improved. I do agree. I did like it, though. We didn't really get... We got the German one, but I'm curious about the Allied one, if that has been changed. Good game stability, or at the very least been maybe improved on, or, you know, more audio given. To make it actually seem like they're... I don't know. They actually have more input, because it seemed like they're... Maybe it just wasn't... I don't know. It seemed a little off. But anyway, good game stability. Still no reverse button when compared to the old one. Code 2 didn't have a reverse button until later, at least effective one, because pathfinding was at odds. They eventually fixed that. I found this one to be fine, but if it is worse, good thing you called it out. Again, did you guys feel the reverse button was better or worse? Because I didn't notice it was worse, but maybe it was worse. I don't know. The Oberstriker. My thoughts are, if again, this is obviously it's over by this point. I'm hoping for multiplayer in an update before that. Otherwise, it was fun one mission. Okay, I'm glad you liked the one mission, but that was only a single player. I don't know if they're doing a multiplayer one, but I would make a bet saying they probably would do a multiplayer alpha or beta before release, at the very least, so that way they can make sure their servers are up to par and there's no disconnect issues or anything like that. Don't be a Halo Master Chief Collection. Don't be a Battlefield 2042. All sorts of stuff that did releases in betas way late, right? Like a month before release, or they didn't do betas at all and they just had horrible crashing. So I think a test run would probably be the sensible idea. I also think the UI is too busy. I want to turn things off or to make them smaller. Again, this kind of goes with the idea of customizing UI. Make sure the player can do what they want. Joey's going to get into a comment down below that kind of goes into why. But again, more customization options for the UI will make the competitive players happy, the non-competitive players happy, and just the general players happy. So, yeah. Anyway, Joey G says, I like almost everything so far, but not having an Italian faction to play in Africa or Italy is the biggest problem. Again, it seems like the doc will have Italian units, but again, I get the sentimentality of wanting the Italians, but I get on a gameplay-wise and a campaign-wise why they aren't introduced, because by the time in Italy, the Italians are pretty much done, and in North Africa at that time, the Germans are leading the sphere with Italian support. It's not the Italians leading the charge. If it was another theater, I could definitely see that. Also, a little too much with the UI. I would get rid of the bottom line that had the menu option, agree, and move the menu option to replace one of the pings, which are not necessary, and move the mini-map down and make the mini-map smaller. I agree with you 100%. Why are there ping system in a game versus AI? You're not gonna do this with other players. Like, oh, hey, AI, here's where I'm attacking. It's AI's not going to respond like that. You get pinged 50 times, but I don't believe it's going to do anything. I'll be amazing if it does, but I don't think you need it. And again, having the option to get rid of it, especially in campaign, would be good. And mini-map smaller, I know that a lot of the competitive players would be at odds with that, but there's a lot of people who do not focus entirely on the mini-map. So for a majority of players that just play looking at the screen and with the mini-map on a small scale, yeah, making the minimap smaller or customizing it would be the preferable options. Anyway, that one. By the way, that one, please work on your grammar. My God. While I get the Italian army didn't have a stellar performance on War II, they didn't have an interesting armor core. They could have made the Italian faction centered on infantry with nice air and naval support. Navy I get. Air support's a little more mixed, but I do get it. Again, for me, the strongest aspect of the Italians were their Navy. I know it's weird to say that, but I do think, especially most of the battles against the British, they did lose. But, and the Air Force had a lot of mechanical issues and production problems. But their Navy, at least, they kept learning from it. Sure, you have, like, Toronto, but they kept trying different things and did succeed at knocking out multiple British ships, including battleships in like Alexandria and such. So they were effective at neutralizing large amounts of British material for a very small cost. So that's why I give the edge to the Navy. Anyway, informs of Collins with support from the German units in the form of specialized or elite units for their armor core. In the same way the British seem to have colonial units for their elite infantry. Hell, the Italians even had pretty nice armored cars, if I recall correctly. I believe they do. I believe you're correct with that. They actually did have pretty good armored cars. As for the game being not historical accurate enough, yeah, sure, the Italians didn't have... I'm sorry. Yeah, sure, the Italian army didn't achieve major accomplishments, but that's an understatement. But it has... but in the hands of the player, to make them, in multiplayer at least, for a single-player campaign, the Doc got defeated in the end of Africa. Okay, you say the Germans lost in the end doesn't change the fact that they effectively recovered North Africa in 41. They beat the British and then fumbled the ball to the British, and the British managed to recover and get a touchdown against them at the end of 41. And then 42, they had a successful counterattack all the way to El Alamein, which, yeah, they definitely threw the Allies back. So I don't see but the Doc got defeated in the end as a big thing, because again, the Italians didn't get defeated in the end. They got defeated a majority of the time. That's my problem. Like, there's no concrete period where the Italians are launching a successful group of attacks and then achieve a major breakthrough or something like that. They had small victories here and there in their army, but like the 1940 Battle of Africa, they lost. The 41 battle, they held their line, and eventually Rommel fumbled the ball to the British after the British literally lost all their men and through the game. And that, because again, he wasted all of his supplies, did this weird dashing maneuver, and I highly recommend looking at the battle through, I think Kingston Generals did something on it, or Time Ghost definitely did something on it. But yeah, it's very weird. Very weird. Arbitrary Historian, I know, did a breakdown on it, but yeah, it's very weird. Anyway, as Greyshot said, the Italians held their ground when the Germans retreated. That's true, but also the Germans were like, we have no supplies to get you out, so... we'll be back. And then when the Italians realized they weren't back, that's when they started to surrender. But they did fight like hell to hold the Allies back. Give me an adult gritty campaign with the Italian soldiers at the center. I would be fine with that, but I would find it hilarious if Relic was like, hey, and again, they're not, but I would find it hilarious. They would be like, here's your Italian campaign, and every single mission, you get like terrible units. You're given poor equipment, not enough equipment, you're sent out to like get an objective, and you can never get the objective in the campaigns. Every time you play as the Italians, like sometimes you do it, but other times it's like, you must take that hill with all your men, and you just can't. And it's like, all right, well, mission complete. It's like, we didn't complete the objective. It's like, that's the point. The Italians didn't. I could see something like that, but I don't think a lot of players would be happy if they finally got a North African campaign and they spent half the time either on defense or not achieving objectives that are marked down on the map. It would be making interesting in a troll campaign for sure, but I think people would be more upset. Anyway, hell, I'm not even Italian. I'm sorry if I'm not making much sense. Grammar-wise, yeah. But this being a World War II game based on the Italian theater and given the Italian secondary role sounds lazy and disrespectful to me. It would be disrespectful, right, if they did a campaign in Greece and they only showed the Germans. That would be disrespectful in my eyes, because the Italians made up a majority of that battle against the Greeks. And the Germans were the last like 2-3 weeks of the war in Greece, where the Italians were like 8 months in fighting and losing to the Greeks. That would be disrespectful. I don't think them now having a campaign in 42 or 43 when their country gave up, and not gave up, they signed an armistice and then got taken over by the Germans and fought the Germans. I don't think that's lazy. I would be cool though if the Allies got Italian units as well. Like both sides get specialized Italian units. That would be cool. All right, Diego. This one's a fun one. This guy clearly is relic paid or don't know about anything. Or sorry, a Co. Real quick, this comment was left in the good, the bad, the CoH3 alpha video. And I find what I love about this video, comment, is the fact that in the first 20 seconds of the video, I literally say, hey, I have a referral program. I'm not going to put it in this video, but note, if you use it, I get paid by Relic by that, right? And also the second part, it's also Relic gave me early access so I could play this. So note, there's a conflict of interest there, but I want to make you aware of that before going in to all the problems and the positive things about the alpha. So I find it hilarious that this guy immediately says, this guy's clearly paid, when I immediately said that, and doesn't know anything about Co, when I've been playing the game as well for like, what, at this point, like 8 years over. So yeah, I think I know a little bit, not maybe as much as Tightrope, but I would say I'm pretty knowledgeable about the game. So I find this hilarious, the fact you didn't even spend 20 seconds watching the video before making that comment. That's pretty funny. MJ Lindero, I personally would like the dock to have been split with German-Italian faction. I will say the Ost tier, if I recall correctly, has a Italian tank destroyer, and then I believe the dock, again, in the campaign, because we don't know their individual, faction in terms of what units they get. Like, we don't know the upgrade path, we don't know the buildings, we don't know anything. They could have Italian units. Again, more info is needed. For example, instead of having Panzergrenz as line infantry, they could have made Italian Soldati as light infantry. Let the Panzergrenz be heavy infantry. Give the Italian M14 series as the light tank for the dock and make it similar to the T-70. I find that, I think that's a good idea. If the dock needs paratroopers, use full gore instead of Fallschirmjägers. I agree that the Italian itself probably doesn't have enough to make a good and viable faction. I disagree with that. I think the Italians do have enough to make a faction, but I say it once, I'll say it again. For a campaign for players to play with an end goal, with like a grand finale, the 1942 North African campaign as the dock makes much more sense than the Italian 1940 campaign, where they moved a little bit and then stopped. Or the 41 North African campaign, where they only made it to Tobruk, and it was a very long siege before you had this weird battle. Was it Operation Crusader? That, again, the Germans won and then wasted all their supplies in a stupid dash that made no sense. And then the British took advantage of that. Almost were literally very close to killing Rommel or capturing Rommel. And then Rommel fled back. And then it was like, I don't have the supplies to keep holding this. I need to retreat. So, again, highly recommend you look up Operation Crusader. It's insane. But anyway, yeah, I think, again, we already saw some Italian units in there. I'm curious to see more info about the faction to learn more about their battle groups and how much the Italians do play a part into the dock. All right, Tiondo. Personally, I reject your Italian argument on historical performance. This game has zero to do with actual performance. Okay. Hold that thought, but okay. They could include it and just make them good. All right, so what you're saying is have a campaign where the Italians are the sole and only reason that they won North Africa, and or make battles in which the Italians lost actually won. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, sure. I'm sure all the people that love to nitpick everything about historical accuracy would just be totally fine with that. Just make them just like they make Ostrieben good in Code 2, despite them being about as effective in the heat of battle as butter on a hot tin roof. Fun fact, the Wehrmacht does have a campaign in Code 2. They have theater of war missions, but a lot of those you can play with multiplayer, and a lot of those are just, here's a scenario of like a weird objective, good luck. Like, here's a bunch of Katyushas, or here's a bunch of armor. You have to hold against the more numerical Germans, but you have less, but actually better armored units as the Soviets. Weird like that. But anyway, yeah, getting into this, I find it dumb. Your counter argument is multiplayer, and your Italian argument is single player. I find that to not make much sense, Tiondo. But again, that's your thoughts, and that's my thoughts on why your thoughts are wrong. No, I'm joking. Again, the multiplayer aspect makes more sense in terms of the Italians, but because there are two campaigns, and because the campaign has to be North Africa in 42, I get why they did Doc. Again, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but I just want to point that out. Anyway, Captain Jin. I get why they didn't get them as well, but still, not having the Italian faction is such a disappointment for me. I still likely get the game, but it just seems asinine not to put them in when there's so many interesting tanks, weapons, deployments, etc. that could be included. I'm not saying the Italians didn't have interesting stuff. They absolutely did, especially for what they could create with their limited manufacturing capabilities. But I will say, again, I get why they did what they did. I would love / hate if they add one as DLC, which would just be a double slap in the face, but I'd be happy, lol. Or a good compromise could be in the campaign, one of the company types they could use is largely Italian focused. I'm assuming he's talking about the battle groups, which again, I think that would, I'm curious to see if the doc does have battle groups specifically tied to the Italians. Again, I think that would be a good compromise as well. Would I, if we're talking about DLC, would I be opposed to an Italian DLC? No, I would not. Honestly, I'm kind of thinking of ideas of like, because a lot of people are bringing this up about like implementing them, and again, I bring up the interesting part of the campaign. So if I were to somehow include the Italians in a hypothetical, I would kind of give my perfect scenario to include the Italians. But again, we'll kind of go into that in another video. Right now, again, I already made enough arguments about the Italian input. Let's just continue. But I do think, again, let's see how much Italian influence is in the doc, in their battle groups, in their faction, because we still don't know what's in their base faction. All right, Civil Protection says, the only way I see Italians is an Italian-focused German commander. Italy itself just lacks mostly everything as military, terrible tanks. Not terrible, per se, for some of them. Some of their tanks are good for what they have. But I will say they were typically at best, they were okay or a step behind the rest of the allies. But I don't think they were too terrible. They were just, unfortunately, with Italy's manufacturing capabilities, the best they could produce at the time. Again, I think Potential History does a great video going over the Italian tanks, if you want like a quick summary of the Italian armor. Anyway, but no, I don't think they're terrible, but I think overall it's just Italy doing the best with what it could. Anyway, lack of experienced soldiers. They definitely had good men. They just didn't have... There's a bunch of soldiers being like, why are we fighting in Greece? There's, like, again, the guy wants to take it, but what's the goal for us? They didn't have motivating factor. Terrible tactics. Yeah, constantly charge your men. I will say, like World War I. There were Italian commanders And again, Armchair Historian goes over this, that literally were like, we will learn about the tactics of this war when it's done, not now. We'll use our current tactics so we know, which was a lot of stuff from World War One. The Romanians did the same thing. I mean, technically, the French and British did a lot of the same things, but the French died or surrendered, and the British eventually realized how to improve it. Like the British, the main issue with them, which I'd be curious to see if they do it, is a lot of the problems they had, especially early on, was lack of AT. They didn't really know how to use AT, and then eventually when they finally started incorporating better AT into their divisions and into their tactics, that's when you really started see them turn the tide against a lot of the armor charges of the dock. But we'll see how that goes. No will to fight, and heavily depends on Germany, like when they tried to invade Greece, and the whole reason why Germany got dragged into Africa was because Mussolini wanted to expand. I will say, though, just for historical context, Germany did offer to send Mussolini troops into North Africa in 1940. Mussolini turned it down because, again, he wanted to show the power of Italy, which we all know how that went. But I do find it fascinating because, again, it's every fascist or authoritarian dictator being like, well, I have to show how good I am, so let me do something like what Germany's doing, and then they end up falling in their face. Again, Romania tried it once their fascist coup took place. Hungary did it with their armor production. Italy did it. Again, a lot of those authoritarian leaders were like, we're like, yes, we're part of this alliance, but again, my faction, of course, is my country is better. Let me figure out how we can expand that territory, which is why you saw a lot of bickering between like Vichy France, Italy, Spain, etc. But anyway, sorry, I'm getting dragged down into this. But yeah, no, I think that you could do a Italian faction, like Ruse. Ruse has an Italian faction. A lot of the enjoyment of Ruse is the advanced prototypes, but still, I think you could do that. But as a campaign for aggression, I think Italians might be a little short for that. GP Network. I don't agree with your aspect regarding the Italians. The Italians were able to hold back the British until the Germans, with their Africa Corps... I'm sorry. I don't agree with the aspect regarding the Italians. The Italians were able to hold back the British until the Germans... I'm assuming... until the Germans, with their Africa Corps, came to aid the Italians. I highly recommend you look up Operation Compass, because I feel like that might change your summary of the British, the British, not being able to fight the Italians, because they could. For reference, the British forces had 30,000 men, I believe, and the Italians had over 100,000. Not all. I know they had 200,000 men across North Africa, but like opposing the British, and the British beat them because they had mechanized and they had better armor. That the Matilda specifically, which the Italians just could not pen. So they were able to use the armor to encircle and destroy a lot of Italian units. So no, the Italians could not hold against the British until the Germans came in and finally started relieving them in the middle of 41. So, was it April? April, they started the German counterattack, but they didn't start arriving until, I want to say, February? Maybe late January, around there. Anyway, so, yeah, no. Plus, Italian troops were good. Everyone does this quote. The German soldier was astonished at the will. The Italian Brigades, so I'm butchering this name, has astonished the German soldier. Yes, no one doubts the fact that a soldier is good when properly trained, well armed, and given good tactics. The problem is Italy had generals and a command staff that was based on like positions of like who do you know, not who is good, right? Tactics that were not changing since World War One. And a manufacturing capability that was not able to keep up with all the expansionist ideas and battles it had. Your argument that the Italians were bad is an argument that has been repeated so many times. It's just simply undervalue the Italian army as a whole without adequate studying with the Italian army inefficient in certain aspects. Every army had its weakness. Okay, can't wait to hear this. Goddamn. Can we talk about grammar? Examples. The French who lost immediately due to simple encirclement. No! The French didn't lose. The French is a great example of this. The French had, relatively speaking, good soldiers. You know what killed them? The fact that they had soldiers that were pretty much had low morale because they invaded Germany and got pulled back and then sat around for a phony war. So they're like, okay. And then when they eventually did fight the Germans, they had good morale, but their incompetent leadership, which again, if you don't know the leadership structure of France and even British during the Battle of France, by God, Time Ghost is a great breakdown. There's a amazing video in which he explains how leaders were talking to each other and trying to get a meeting set up over 3 days. And all this time, while they're trying to think of a way to defend France and stop the German pincers from encircling the army, the Germans were encircling their army while they're all just like flying around trying to get meetings and all this stuff. It's insane. But no, it wasn't the French got encircled. It's the French command let down their army, which was overall in a good position to hold the Germans if properly supported and properly utilized. They just didn't do that. The British, who were kicked off France after Dunkirk, that's not a weakness. That's just the position they were in. The Soviets during the entire year of 1941. The Soviets are a much different beast. The Soviets are, yeah, they don't have a lot of good trained men because of, well, a lot of the purges that happened. Again, anyone that wasn't a yes man for Stalin got sent to the gulag or worse. You had a lot of equipment shortages. You had armor that just wasn't up to snuff in terms of being properly maintained. So they had a lot of tanks on paper, but a lot of them they just sent into the meat grinder to hold back the Germans because that's all they could do. They didn't have a lot of good air support. A lot of their air was absolutely annihilated. Like, it's not, and they were caught off guard in terms of the army. A lot of people told Soviet command what was happening, but they didn't really react as quickly as maybe they could have, because in the Soviet leadership, they did not, and specifically Stalin, did not believe that Germany would attack them. And man, that turned out to be false. And again, those who did were sent to the gulag, and then yes men were brought in. So that's no. Anyway, Kursk. Okay, the weakness at Kursk is the Germans did not have the manpower, armor, or the know-how in terms of element of surprise to do that. The Soviets knew they were coming. They had reserves, a lot of armor, a lot of good tactics to hold them back. And guess what? The Germans died on the offensive and lost a lot of men they could have used elsewhere because they lost a lot of key things that made the German army better in 41 and 42, rather in 43, where a lot of the tactics they changed to stuff that was not good, or they attacked with less men. They still did a lot, but overall, the Soviets held their ground, and for the most part, and managed to stop the pincers from encircling them. So, Moscow. The Soviets won the Battle of Moscow. And finally, the Japanese during the invasion of China. What is that a weakness? The Japanese invaded China and initially were successful. The problem was they had no end game, right? There's no end game in China. They didn't have, they won the initial battles, and they took a lot of the industrial heartland of China, but they didn't have an end game. They didn't know how to end the war. That's their weakness. It wasn't necessarily the invasion. And what's his last months of World War II? I don't understand that. Like, yeah, you have to be way more specific, because are you talking about like navally? Like, navally, they were down since the Philippines. So that was, oh God, was the Philippines in June of 44 or July? Again, apologies. Maybe I'm thinking of actually later on where it's more fall. But yeah, no, it's not. I mean, navally, they knocked out for months. Maybe that's it. Air power, they were definitely out for a long time. Ever since Midway, they were down overall with air. Yeah, you have to be way more specific with this. The only few parts of the Italian army were, the only few parts of the Italian army that were generally bad were their tanks, manufacturing, because they couldn't make better tanks. They could make do with what they got. And the generals that were in charge, while their airplanes, ships, and troops were either better or on par with the German ally. Okay. Airplanes, again, manufacturing and issues in terms of tactics, coordination with the different branches, stuff like that. Ships, yes. However, they didn't have a lot of key aspects that the British had. I believe they, and again, I could be wrong, a lot of the Italian ships did not have, let's say, was it sonar, radar, something like that, where they had, the British could pick them up, where the Italians could not pick up the British. So the British were able to typically ambush a lot of Italian units. So, yeah. And troops were either better or on par with the Germans. I'm not saying that the troops weren't on par. They just were never given the equipment or the supplies necessary to do that. If you want videos to back this, I saw these videos. Again, I listed videos as well, GP. Again, Armchair Historian, Time Ghost, Kings and Generals. They all give great detailed breakdowns of the Italian army and a lot of different aspects and a lot of different reasons why they didn't perform. Edit. The Italians also had good medium tanks like the P-40. I don't care if they never saw combat. Oh boy. Hey guys, you know all the shit we're giving the Brits for the Black Prince? Yeah, let's bring in the Italian P-40 that never saw combat. I'm sure, you know what? I'm sure the same people that see the Black Prince would have no issue with a unit that never saw combat. Since the company had the Jagdtiger, which never saw combat, by the way. The Jagdtiger did see combat. The Jagdtiger 100% was involved in battle. There were not as many Jagdtigers, and they weren't involved heavily, but there were some Jagdtigers that actually killed some Allied units. They were just so few that they didn't make a difference, and they were so big and so mechanically at odds with itself that it a lot of times broke down. But sorry, GP, I have to heavily disagree with a lot of what you said. So sorry, but yeah. Anyway, I'll probably do a video. Like I said, I'm probably gonna do a video on the Black Prince. But anyway, they must do bigger compromises with their historical accuracy than just make the game fun. Example. This is by Evo, by the way. I want Italians, I want Soviets, I want Japanese. They must do bigger compromises with historical accuracy and just make the game fun. I want Italians, I want Soviets, I want Japanese become kamikaze planes. Again, I think they would do Japan in a completely separate game. The Soviets would be weird to add, although maybe they could do something like a 40... Like, I'm trying to think of how they would implement the Soviets, right? And maybe they do like a mini campaign where they're liberating the Balkans. Maybe you do something like that where I personally don't know of many battles that took place when Bulgaria surrendered and in Greece and how that went. I believe the Germans retreated for the most part, but maybe you do something like that and that's how you kind of add it in. I want Italians. I think out of them, I think the Italians would make the most sense for a faction that you would add to the game. But that's just me. Pickles USA. I am hoping, I assume, they show Australian units in an update after the game is released. I believe there are Australian units in the game. I believe there's like wallpaper that they have showcased highlighting Australian units. I definitely know there is in the pre-alpha campaign they did, there was a artillery Indian unit, right? So maybe there's different companies like that with the Australians, maybe. That would be cool. But I know there's definitely Indian. I know there's your general British. So, but I definitely know there's Australian units. I hope there's more Australian companies and battle groups, stuff like that. But I definitely know there are units in it at the very least. Nobody. Okay. I agree with your take on the Italians. Adding Italian units like the Gustatori to the existing faction seems like a good way to strike a balance. Okay. So, not everyone thought my opinion was wrong, but again, I don't mind having... look, my opinion doesn't have to be the grand opinion for everything, right? I'm just pointing out what my thoughts are. again, I'm fine with being in the minority in some opinions and the majority in some opinions. That's fine. But again, I just want the game to succeed. That's my main point. So, anyway, again, I think that we don't know the doc, so here's hoping they're in it. And here's hoping they're in it in the maybe either in a battle group or in the main faction itself. Who knows? But here's hoping. Killer Cat. Regarding graphics, CoH3. It's weird. I got a lot of comments. And I tried to get the ones most voted. But I was expecting more comments about the graphics. But that's not what a lot of the comments I got in the video, which I'm, again, shocked by. But anyway, regarding graphics, CoH2, I would say looks more realistic and less cartoony or stylized than CoH3. And I'd say it stood the test of time remarkably well. CoH2 has stood the test of time. I think graphically, yes, it does look good for its age. CoH2 kind of fits in the same vein of like Halo 3, where it just has an art style that just lasts a decent amount of time. And hopefully CoH3 can be a similar way. Sure, if you zoom in, it looks dated, yeah. But CoH2 still looks fine to me. And I agree with that. And again, I'm fine with how CoH3 looks for the most part. Again, I think more polishing, stuff like that, will make it look better. And I think, again, CoH2 was this weird case where it just kept being added on over time. So a lot of the stuff, like, I know they fundamentally changed the flamethrower and a lot of other aspects, so from how it originally looked. So again, if there is something in CoH3 that looks off, that doesn't mean they can't fix it in the future. And as long as they release a lot of content and enough there to justify its price tag, then I'm fine with having a couple issues that they refine over time, right? Because that's how most games are. There are very few games that release perfect. Even Elden Ring, when it released, had, I believe, multiplayer issues that had a lot of, and stability problems. But they were fixed pretty quick, and the overall community was like, hey, we see that. We're totally fine. You made an awesome game with plenty of content and amazing stuff in it. The few problems you have, we're totally fine with. Fix it whenever you can. Thank you for making such an amazing game, right? And I feel like, again, if you have a game with such amazing content in it that is initially out the door, people are more forgiving when there's a couple issues that will be addressed and fixed, hopefully, in a decent amount of time, rather than something like Battlefield 2042, where they release a game and the game is nothing but problems, right? And then again, you have games that are kind of like in the middle, where they have a lot of good, but they also have a lot of bad. I kind of chalk Halo Infinite in there, where they had, my opinion, good combat mechanics, good overall flow, a good performance. The problem I had with Halo Infinite was more content-wise, right? Not many bugs, but just needed more content, like Forge. Like, the fact Forge is taking 8 months is ridiculous, but I am happy that from all the leaks, it looks like Forge is going to be incredible. So it looks like they're not doing a Battlefield 2042 where it's like, yep, bring in the, cargo, just cargo crates. We're just going to put them on the ground. There's your cover. Anyway, that took 6 months of work. It looks like the team is actually putting work into making something amazing rather than whatever the hell they're doing in 2042 or Anthem or whatever game EA or even Ubisoft releases, and they're like, we'll add more. And then some of their games they do, and some of the games they just let to die. But anyway, that's all your comments that I pulled up. Thank you guys so much for submitting those. Hopefully you enjoyed this more relaxed, chilling video with me going over this stuff. But yeah, no, that's some of the comments you guys posted. Again, thank you guys so much to the YouTube community and to my Discord community. Thank you for responding to my plea and my request for all your comments. But yeah, if you have comments, leave it down below. I'll try to answer them as well. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you for, again, sparking this conversation. Next time I talk about CoH3, I'm probably going to talk about the Black Prince and that rabbit hole. So we're going to get into that. But anyway, this has been Greyshot17, and I'll see you guys next time. Hello, everyone. Before you all go, let's give a special shout out to Patreon supporters, Aphyria, Joey G240, Little Chauge, Milam, tonybee, Pyroshark, XSomeToolx, and Epic Pleb. Thank you all for your incredible support and helping me grow my channel and allowing me to keep doing what I do. So thank you. This has been Greyshot, his amazing patrons, and I'll see you all next time.